Mohamed Bouazizi was a young Tunisian man who spent 7 years pushing a vegetable cart around his hometown, trying to save for a pickup truck that would ease the physical burden of his work and enable him to better support his large family. However, in December 2016, a policewoman seized his unlicensed cart and allegedly spat on him in the street. Bouazizi tried to launch a complaint to municipality officials, but was refused an appointment. Within an hour, desperate and disenfranchised, Bouazizi poured fuel on himself and set himself on fire outside the municipality headquarters. He died in hospital 2.5 weeks later. The death of Bouazizi had a catalytic effect on the Arab world, igniting a series of mass civilian uprisings that began in Tunisia and rippled through the Middle East to Egypt, Yemen, Bahrain, Libya and Syria. Widespread discontent with their country's disproportionate economic structure, upheld by corrupt and authoritarian regimes, saw a partial unification of the Arab middle class and the overthrow of government leaders in Tunisia, Egypt, Libya and Yemen. However, what began as peaceful protests in Syria have since resulted in an unprecedented civil war, now in the midst of its 7th year. So how has President Bashar al-Assad maintained his regime in a country devastated by internal conflict and external intervention?
But Assad is representative of, once Assad goes, you crack the artifice of the regime. So the logic of the regime is to maintain power.
With no prior political experience, Assad inherited the presidency from his father, who passed away in 2000 after ruling the country for nearly 30 years. The regime had a history of suppressing political opposition with aggressive military force in order to maintain governance, a tactic that Assad has continued to employ. After a series of small-scale civilian protests in March 2011 called for an increase of democratic reform and a decrease in regime corruption, the military retaliated by opening fire on hundreds of demonstrators and detaining tens of thousands in prison. Unlike neighbouring Arab countries, the initial aim of the Syrian protests were not to overthrow the government, but the military's armed response prompted hundreds of thousands of protesters to demand the president's resignation. However, protests were scattered across the country and lacked a clear and unified front, missing the central and permanent coalition of protesters evident in Egypt's Tahrir Square. What developed is a stalemate, a vast opposition that lacks military strength and a common goal, and a regime that's still in power but unable to control the entire country.
So you've got these tiers overlaying a conflict dynamic that's perpetual, which has just created an absolute perfect storm in Syria that's destroyed the country for generations.
The primary aim of the Syrian government and its allies is to consolidate control of the country from the numerous opposition groups rooted throughout the region. The political ambitions and military capabilities between these groups are significantly varied. The Free Syrian Army are advocating for the establishment of a democratic state, whilst Islamic militants such as Jaish al-Islam are striving to rebuild a country on the foundational principles of Islam. A number of terrorist groups with tactical insurgency experience also have a significant presence throughout the country, such as the Islamic State, whose ambition to establish their own caliphate has drawn thousands of foreign fighters to the region. Further complicating the conflict is the multitude of external parties that have intervened to influence the balance of power in the region. Russia, China, Iran, and military organisation Hezbollah are key allies of the Assad government, providing consistent military and economic support. As permanent UN Security Council members, Russia and China have also used their veto power against numerous Western-backed resolutions condemning Assad. In recent years, the momentum of the war has tipped in Assad's favour, partly due to Russia's enhanced support, but also because of the shifting interests of the opposition's key allies. Becoming less concerned with removing Assad from power, the United States has concentrated its attention on leading the fight against the Islamic State. Turkey's first priority is to prevent the establishment of an autonomous Kurdish province in northern Syria that could potentially inspire similar separatism within Turkey. Lastly, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states are focused on restricting what they view to be Iran's expansionist plans.
Where you have funding coming into Syria from independent or semi-independent actors, prominent families with a lot of money in Kuwait, in the UAE, in Qatar, in Saudi, going in and funding independent militias. This is very much sort of almost a status symbol, having a militia that you fund for some families. And this will be, we'll go into Turkey, we'll buy a heap of guns and a few Toyota Hiluxes, and we'll send it over the border.
Amidst this complex battleground of proxy wars, Syria and its population have been devastated by domestic combat, war crimes by the Assad regime, and internationally led airstrikes against the Islamic State. More than 400,000 Syrians have been killed, more than 1 million injured, and 10 million, half of the country's population, has been displaced, which has significantly strained the social, economic structure of neighbouring states such as Jordan. Despite the mounting crisis, the former US ambassador to Syria has explained there is no conceivable military alignment that's going to be able to remove him. Everyone, including the US, has recognised that Assad is staying.
I don't think the change was certainly as big or the form of what some had hoped in 2012, 2013, 2014. But it has created a vulnerability, or a sense of vulnerability amongst authoritarian regimes, and has made them more reactive to signs of unrest.
Plagued by a diverse plurality of local forces and international powers, the conflict has fractured the country and destabilised the surrounding region, with no foreseeable resolution in sight. The spark of hopeful revolution lit by the Arab Spring has long been forgotten amidst the devastating civil war, with the greater region now trapped in a period of conflict and uncertainty, commonly referred to as the Arab Winter. We have to go to a break, but stick around as Omar Al-Qassab joins me to discuss his experience of leaving Syria as a refugee to arriving in Melbourne, where he now lives as a business student and motivational speaker.